asked her to marry me on the River Seine.
There was a ring that I saw 2 years ago. He went back for it and found it. Somebody bought it. He found it, bought it from them, and he proposed with it.
When David Bowie and Iman started their love affair, the world was enchanted. A rock icon and a supermodel, two figures who were considered invincible, but whose union was truly real. When Bowie died in 2016, Iman swore she would never remarry, labeling him her husband forever. Now, 22 years later, the daughter they had is all grown up, and the world is shocked at how much she has changed. Who is this young woman, and how does she inherit the mantle of two legends? Tune in, because her tale might leave you gasping. Iman's origins in Somalia before Iman rose to become one of the most famous supermodels in the world. Her tale began in the center of Somalia, a country where family, tradition, and fortitude molded her personality long before fame ever did. Born Zahra Muhammad Abdul Majid on July 25, 1955, in Mogadishu, her life was characterized from the start by a sense of individuality and mission. She was the first female child in 6 generations of her clan, a feat that immediately set her apart. In a dynasty of sons, Iman's birth seemed like history repeating itself, as if her family recognized that she was going to make a difference. Her father, Mohammed Abdul Majid, was a diplomat who even served as an ambassador to Saudi Arabia, representing Somalia. This left Iman's childhood not just shaped by family heritage, but also bordered by an understanding of global politics and culture. Her mother, Marian, was a gynecologist, a talented woman in her own right who was an example of independence and intelligence to her daughter. Having grown up around such powerful women provided Iman with a background of discipline and learning, which would later prove useful once she entered the world arena. It was her grandfather who named her Iman, meaning faith in Arabic. He figured that this name would become a guiding star, a blessing to protect her and bring her success within a world that tends to undervalue women. In the future, Iman would reflect upon this gift as one in which the power of her name became a part of her very being. What began as a blessing from her grandfather became the affirmation she brought with her to every room, runway, and camera lens. Iman's childhood, though, was anything but glamorous. She grew up with her grandparents in Somalia, surrounded by tradition weaving his life in the pride of her culture. At 4 years of age, she was enrolled at a boarding school in Egypt, a location that broadened her experience even more. This is where Arabic, English, and Italian were spoken together. The education was varied as well, going beyond book forms. Living outside home at such a young age instilled in her a spirit of independence and flexibility, assets that would stand her in good stead during the turbulent years ahead. But when Somalia plunged into a cycle of political unrest, her father began thinking of moving the family first to Mogadishu and then to Kenya in search of more stability. It provided me with a very special insight into both the fragility and strength of life in Africa. These were lessons that kept her down to earth, even when her own future took her far away from home. By the time she reached the University of Nairobi, Iman was a strong young girl with aspirations of her own. She selected political science for her major, indicative of the interest she had in government and his diplomatic background. Modeling at this point was not even on a radar. The focus of attention was on American photographer Peter Beard, who happened to be roaming the campus where she was attending school. Beard was immediately impressed by her copper-colored skin, elegant body, and long neck, and was adamant that she had model potential. Iman did not melt at first, though. In her own mind, she was not something of beauty, but a diligent student with goals having political roots. Beard was persistent, however, and eventually she consented to get in front of the camera. This would change the direction of her life entirely. In one of them, she would find her way into America, and by 1976, there would be a Vogue everywhere in the world with her face on the cover. Iman was never like so many others, not just because of how beautiful she looked, but also because of the very depth of her Somali heritage. She strode with dignity and kept reminding people in most of her interviews that the beauty they were seeing was the standard Somali beauty and nothing exotic or artificial. Such cultural pride, was what made her attractive, and she was educating the world of fashion that elegance could actually be enjoyed and rooted in heritage. Designers like Yves Saint Laurent, Gianni Versace, and Donna Karan valued her presence not just as a model, but as an inspiration. But long before she was inspiring the designers, Iman was just a little Somali girl. Her name was Faith, and her family thought she was meant to be great. Her childhood slipped away in Mogadishu, Cairo, and Nairobi, and it gave her solidity, resilience, and a sense of self that fame could never remove. Iman's ascension from Somali student to international fashion icon in the making was in place, but the man who would transform her life was years off. The chameleon of rock, if Iman's life was characterized by tradition and refinement, David Bowie's existence was characterized by reinvention, rebellion, and unbridled creativity. Born David Robert Jones on January 8, 1947, in Brixton, London, his road to stardom was anything but straightforward. In his early days, Bowie was merely another aspiring artist trying to find his niche. He played with local bands and attempted to cut through the thick of the dense music scene of the 1960s. But his initial attempts were all over the map and left no apparent mark. Even his first album in 1967 did not generate much buzz. To most, it would have appeared as though it was the demise of a fleeting dream. But Bowie was no typical artist. His insistence on remaking himself would turn out to be his ultimate strength. The turning point arrived in 1969 with the album Space Oddity. Based on the Apollo 11 moon landing, the ominous single recounted the tale of the hypothetical astronaut Major Tom and hooked listeners from the moment they heard it. The track rose up the UK charts and inaugurated Bowie's rise to fame. But Bowie was never satisfied to ride out success. For him, every hit was not a destination, but a stepping stone to a fresh creative identity. His discontent created one of his most famous alter egos, Ziggy Stardust. In 1972, Bowie brought the world the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Ziggy became something greater than a character. With his flashy outfits, androgynous appearance, and brazen stage presence, he became a cultural revolution. Starman and Suffragette City were greater than singles. They were anthems for outsiders, dreamers, and anyone who ever felt like an outcast. Bowie's fluid acceptance of identity and rule-breaking became a route to heroism for all those who found themselves on the periphery of society. Conversely, Bowie must never be limited to a concept, however iconic it was, Ziggy. But in the mid-70s, it discarded all the glamour and embarked upon what it referred to as plastic soul. The collaboration with John Lennon, My 1975, went on to occupy the top spot in the Billboard in the U.S. and reminded everyone of every nationality, or not, that Bowie could cross over anywhere. His album Young Americans showed how he could blur funk soul and rock so comfortably. Critics might loathe the fact that he can never stick with his various pictures, but fans adore him for his chutzpah. And that same energy translated into the form of an acting career, too. His 1976 science fiction film The Man Who Fell to Earth, in which he starred, made him famous not just as a musician, but as a performer and a teller of stories. A short while later, he released his now legendary Berlin trilogy, Low, 1977, Heroes, 1977, and Lodger, 1979, with the aid of producer Brian Eno. These extremely experimental electronic-intensive albums push the boundaries of rock and will shape countless generations of musicians to come. Heroes especially turn out to be one of Bowie's greatest all-time tunes, praised for its raw and unbridled passion and rebellion. Starting from the 1980s, Bowie had transformed himself into a global pop phenomenon. His 1983 album, Let's Dance, was an international success story, from which came such hits as Modern Love and China Girl. The album's dancing rhythm took Bowie to arenas and disco clubs across the globe, exposing him to a completely new set of people. He was no longer a cult figure, but part of the commonality's firmament. And yet, he never surrendered to art. In each successive decade, Bowie was the iconoclast, whether through his group Tin Machine in the late 1980s, the creation of more electronic records in the 1990s, or his critically acclaimed later output, Black Star, released just 2 days before his death in 2000.